isn't that the kind of the idea with all these fakakta debates, peace and love, that you do? Like sometimes where it's like, well, if you, first of all, you have to be exposed to new ideas, so you see the problem. Yeah. But like the idea is that there's some kind of like not immersion theory, but like where the idea that like you cannot have any growth of any kind if there's not exposure of some kind that breaks down the frame. I'm trying to think of what Lakoff called it, but it's totally escaping me right now. But
no, for sure, right? I mean, I think, that is always the thing that, and this is actually why I hate the way that a lot of lefty, to use another term that I hate, content creators, when they do debates, the way they often approach it is they're trying to say things that will make people who already like them slow clap. Because you really got them, and that always just seemed aggressively pointless to me. That like surely the point is to say something that will plant some kind of seed with whoever in the audience, happens to, you catch them at just the right point in their arc that, that a seed is plantable. And, generally speaking, unfortunately, and I mean, this is why some of those debates you're talking about, like, look, I'm not, it's like, some of the things like that James O'Keefe thing, it's like, okay, novelty value alone, I wasn't going to like say no to like, do you want to do this thing with James O'Keefe, Tim Pool, and Tulsi Gabbard?
It'll make for an interesting story, and like, okay, that's about all you're going to get out of it, though. Like that's
yeah.
And you also have that tied to you for forever. Congratulations.
Yeah. For the most part, yeah. I mean, I always remember Megan Day when I was like talking to her on the phone about some Jackman stuff earlier in the week, and I told her I was doing that that weekend in New York, and she was like, "Ben, that sounds to me like you're describing a dream you had." And then like Tulsi Gabbard was there for some reason.
Right. I don't know why. She wasn't there before.
She was in a bikini holding a surfboard. It was just weird.
Yeah. But like, look, I mean, even though that one, in a way, it's a bad example because it's like I actually did, as Jason Miles can testify, we were like walking out of, we were walking out of the debate, and he'd, he told me he was like, he thought I would like ask him to like meet him in the back or something. I'm not afraid of these people, right? It's like I have a, it's like, what are they
like
going to
this
do,
at
right?
them, and they're gonna like, oh.
Yeah, right. So we walked out through the front, and had a few conversations on our way, and we did actually have a couple of guys who did express that, like, part of what I'd said about how, if you really care about free speech, you should want there to be more and stronger unions to make it harder to fire people. You're like, oh, that's interesting. I never thought about it that way before. So there was actually some immediate feedback at the time, but even so, even though there was at least a couple people who were physically present, and who it did seem to plant some kind of seed with, but like, even so, that's the kind of thing that's like stretching the boundaries of like what there's a point to, right? That like certainly the Yarvin one, is in that category, that it's like, these are things that it's like, okay, it's like a fun story. It's sort of hard to say no just for the novelty value or whatever, but it's like, it's really pushing the limits of like what actually makes sense given the sort of mission statement here. But something like, the Charlie Kirk one, makes perfect sense because there's a huge audience. And he's actually like, obviously not my favorite guy. In fact, I don't know if we still have that clip of the Cain and Abel thing. If so, we could actually watch that.
The first murder in the Bible was socialism. How often do you have a pastor tell you that? 2 sacrifices, God likes one of them, doesn't love one of them, resentment, murder. All throughout the scriptures, you see envy. I want somebody else's stuff. I don't have it as good. Drive you to very evil and dark places. So if you think human beings are naturally great, then you think you can create heaven on earth. And that is the promise of socialism.
But, obviously not my favorite guy for many, many reasons, right? But like, he is actually willing to sort of have like a calm, long discussion about like that stays on topic and all of that, right? So that's kind of perfect.
But I want to zero in on this because I think we have a really interesting point philosophically. Yeah. Do you think if someone takes a risk in America, they should be able to keep the reward?
Not entirely, no. I mean, you don't think entirely. I mean, like the only way you could think entirely is if you were an anarchist and you didn't think that we should.
But what are the limitations on that then?
I mean, again, I think that the question that you want to ask, if the question is some transfer of wealth justified? Because I think that's the real question, right? When are transfers of wealth justified? And I think that you need to go back to what are the principles that justify what you think a distribution of wealth in the first place should be. Now, you could think that whatever kind of distribution you get, letting the chips fall where they may in a free market, that's what's justified. I don't think that. I think that the distribution of wealth that we have, and I think taxation and redistribution, even in the sort of market socialist system that I was advocating earlier, I think you'd still need those things. But I think that the distribution of wealth that's justified is the one that would emerge from a social contract that people would agree to under certain circumstances. And I do think like, yeah, look, this is always going to be, people who are sort of spend all their time talking about politics online have a certain kind of like, okay, I've heard it all, whatever. But it's like anything that has any kind of significant audience, you're always saying it for the first time that somebody's hearing it.
That's a very important point.
Yeah. So
I think people forget that in terminally online spaces constantly.
Exactly. No, all the goddamn time, right? It's like it's the it's the stuff it's like literally it's like the like the bird that sticks its head in the sand, right? That it's the
ostrich.
Ostrich. Thank you, Jesus.
You're welcome, my son.
Yeah, so it's like if I can't see it, it's not there, right? That like it's like, well, if I've heard all this before, so has everybody, even though I'm a weird obsessive who spends all day, every day talking about politics on Twitter, and 99.99999% of the human race does not. And it's like this, the flip side of the way that like people who spend, who are, again, weird political obsessives, like to be clear, me, right?
Yeah.
But, people who are weird political obsessives sort of assume that anything that like they encounter a lot on Twitter must be like a common opinion that lots of people actually have in real life.
No, that is not true. Well, and it's so you bring up an important point.
God, look at all these people who like Hamas. That must be a really common thing.
I'm not from Wisconsin. I'm from California. I'm from the Kansas, California, from the Central Valley. And then I lived in Oakland my life. But I moved to Milwaukee in 2017, and one thing I noticed immediately is that if I would be in a situation around people that, first of all, no one ever identified as conservative. They would be like, well, I hate them both. They suck, blah, blah, blah. But then I would just listen and sort of like ask questions and sort of, very calmly sort of, oh, yeah, well, I think that if you actually want to live in a free society, you do have to pay taxes. Oh, what do you mean by that? Like just engage in a conversation that isn't didactically shouting, basically, that you would get a lot of, you said the key phrase, wow, I've never thought about that. And then if they actually made a good point, which would happen once in a while, like, yeah, I've heard that before. That's interesting, and what universally was like, oh, I've never had a conversation like this before is what people would usually say. And I'm like, really? Really? Like never? Just like in the way that one time post tour, we were driving to Yellowstone in Wyoming, and we stopped at a coffee shop that was like the little hipster coffee shop of this little like 5,000 person town, right? And I don't know how the subject came up. I think I was like making fun of like a campaign sign or something, and the barista was like, "Yeah, I've never met someone who claimed to be a Democrat before." I'm like, "What?" And like,
Wyoming checks out.
And you got to understand, like, I'm only was like, yeah, I registered as Democrats. Yeah, Jesus, like coming up from the fact, like, oh, that's like a surrender to my moral values to do that. And like, I was like, wait, I'm sorry, back it up. It reminded me of when we played in Delaware, and I met a dude that said, I've never been outside the state of Delaware. And I'm like, how is that possible?
Is it a corporation?
No, it was a guy, and I get the joke, but I'm saying I think we need to take a step back. First of all, Delaware as a state, really, that's a state. That was like the size of my neighborhood in Oakland. But anyway, like how it's like you made a choice to like limit yourself in such a way, right?
People like there are innumerable people, many of whom would actually be, you know, I mean, look, I understand that, you know, I understand most people are just not like consuming political content on YouTube at all. That's like already a weird thing to do. Like that's you know,
we need a version of the sickos meme, ha ha ha, and it's like YouTube.
Yeah, exactly, right. Like if you're watching YouTube at all, you're watching like cat videos or something about sports, or God knows, maybe that gangbang thing that Jason was talking about in the first first part of the main show. Don't watch that. But you know, as the case may be, right? But like if you're like lightly weird, right? That like, you know, you might like become interested enough in politics that you'll watch a YouTube video about it, then look, I mean, I totally think there are people who would like watch something on Charlie Kirk that, you know, like Charlie Kirk's YouTube channel, who've literally maybe never talked to a Democrat in real life, you know, like maybe they've, you know, exchanged, you know, never mind a socialist, just a Democrat.
Yeah. And imagine how many people would be like, well, I'm more of a, you know, Marxist leftist. Nobody cares. Literally no one cares, and you're just confusing people at this point. And people are just real happy to draw like distinction. Look at the People's Front of Judea versus the Judean People's Front, like that argument, which is literally an argument that still happens in organization to this day. And like when that movie came out, sometime in the 70s, right? And so you get this idea of like paring down, like, well, my political belief is I'm this, but not like these guys over here, and it's. Nobody cares.
Yeah.
Nobody cares off the internet, dude.
Well, because it has very little to do with, you know, trying to persuade anybody of anything. It has much more to do with just sort of like curating your personal sense of who you are. You know, it's
who are the good people, who are the bad people. These are the good people. They're the ones that are around me, and these are the bad people, which is literally everyone else.
Yeah, it's a, you know, I mean, it's a personal branding exercise. Like, I don't listen to that. They have a, you know, it's like, are you kidding? That's, you know, it's new metal. No, my friend.
Yeah,
I listen to, you know, like it's approximately the equivalent of that for, you know, for niche politics. You have been watching free public content from Give Them an Argument. To access every single episode of the show, the main show on Monday nights, all of the streams, all of the debate breakdowns, all of the patron-exclusive post-games on Monday nights, all of the patron-exclusive bonus episodes every week, and much, much more, go to patreon.com/Ben Burgis. I cannot resist ending this with, don't be foolish.